And what's really exciting, go and get your mic all situated, is not only was he leading worship tonight, but Bruce is going to share his story with us tonight. Isn't that awesome? So we're going to go ahead and pray for him. I want to encourage you, with testimonies, we say this every single time somebody shares their story. You have to understand that even if their story is different than the issue that brought you here on Monday night, people work programs for all sorts of different things here. So even if it's not the program you're working, you can still glean from them and learn from it. Pay attention to the emotions they feel. Pay attention to the lies sometimes people believe. And you can, if you're humble and you're open, you will learn anything from anybody, even if their story is different. Got it? Got it. All right, let's pray for Bruce. Lord, pray you bless my brother. Give him peace and use him tonight to reach people with your hope that we just sang about. In Jesus' name. And everyone said, Amen.
Good evening. My name is Bruce. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, and I'm in recovery for addictions to sex and alcohol, and I'm also working on anger issues, depression, and codependency. I'm an adult child of upheaval, of alcoholism, and of abuse. But not knowing any better, I thought I had a normal, happy childhood. Growing up in a home where abandonment, abuse, and constant upheaval were the norm, I developed techniques to cope with the trauma of childhood. Some of my experiences left obvious physical and emotional damage, but a great deal of the pain remained hidden or suppressed for decades. Many of those coping mechanisms continue to surface to this day, and usually in unhealthy ways. I was born during one of my dad's numerous overseas tours. My dad was an ambitious career Air Force pilot, and in the Air Force, that resulted in hopscotching around the country, pulling up stakes every year or so, and adjusting once again to new living quarters. Living in a trailer, bungalow, cabin, apartment, sixplex, duplex, single-family home, and we at one time lived in a veritable mansion. 2, I had to get adjusted to new schools, new teachers, new curriculum, and new grading systems. I switched schools 14 times in 12 years. New neighborhoods. I've lived in the city, the country, the suburbs, poor, middle class, and wealthy, on and off an Air Force base. 4, adjusted to innumerable friends of every type you can imagine. 5, new climates. I lived in rainy Washington, sunny Southern California, hot, dry Arizona desert, beautiful central and miserable southeastern Texas, flat treeless Kansas, the Great Lakes states of Illinois and Ohio, lived in cold New England. I lived in the deep South in Tennessee and South Carolina. And finally, right here, the lightning hurricane capital of the country, Florida. And new customs, new accents, new churches and denominations. We changed church denominations 6 times. And finally, had to get adjusted because every other year we welcomed a new brother or sister into my family until there were 8 children, a family of 10. A childhood of upheaval and insecurity is a huge understatement. These experiences prepared me well for an ever-changing world, and I learned that insecurity was normal. I assumed that everyone's family was unstable, that everyone prepared and expected change at every moment. Friendships were of necessity shallow and short-lived. The experience of longtime friends of home and hometown were completely foreign concepts for me. I had no allegiance to any race, religion, school, or locale, and I coped by hardening my heart, by expecting the worst. I developed the skills of a chameleon, changing my skin to blend into any situation. If I didn't like my current circumstance, I just had to wait a while for something new and different. And in response to these constant changes, I coped by hanging on to things too long, to relationships, to jobs, to living arrangements, to habits, hurts, and hang-ups, even when hanging on is painful or unhealthy or unproductive. Now, my dad was a decorated war veteran, serving in both Korea and Vietnam. He was strong, smart, and funny, always quick with a joke. He loved being the center of attention, and he hosted lots of parties with many friends. However, he lorded over the family like a ruthless king. He was a porn-addicted, serial cheater, an alcoholic, poor with finances, and a brutal disciplinarian whose withering verbal attacks were often worse than his enraged physical attacks. His parenting generated both terror and seething anger in me and a poor self-image. He helped define my poor self-image by repeatedly calling me bad, stupid, talentless, and a failure. He branded me bad, so I became bad. Rebelliousness helped me justify any manner of unsavory behavior: stealing, lying, fighting, bullying, underage drinking, illegal drugs, porn, and worse. But it was the 60s, and my peers all rebelled with music, hair, and clothing styles and drugs. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That was our motto. Tune in, turn on, and drop out. It was the cool thing to do. Being good was boring, but being bad was exciting. He also repeatedly called me stupid. He used the term meathead. And it was funny when Archie Bunker said it, but it tore me to the quick when my dad said it. In response, all the while living under his roof, I did just enough to get by in school because I couldn't please him. That is, if he even noticed. It was never good enough. But once on my own, I excelled academically as if to prove he was wrong. But growing up stupid, I could more easily justify stupid and risky behavior. He never encouraged me academically in sports or in art. My school grades were never good enough. He never attended any of my sporting events, even when I was competing for state-level championships. He never attended my voice recitals, my cornet performances. He never heard me play guitar. What else would anyone conclude but that I'm talentless, a bad, stupid, talentless failure? But in addition to sexual abuse by both men and women, I was exposed to my dad's Playboys and raunchier magazines at a very early age. And this translated into a deep foundational belief in the objectification of women, using women and treating them like objects, seeing them as the lesser sex. So another way of coping was to escape into fantasy with porn and to live out my fantasies with any woman who was willing. But being a failure in my dad's eyes, I coped by being hyper-competitive. And to this day, I hate to lose at anything. Consequently, I've won numerous awards, medals, trophies, letters in sports, academics, business, and in various services. But deep down, I knew that both my dad's character and my response to his parenting were wrong, sinful, and immoral. I knew this because my mom was his polar opposite. My mom was attractive, talented, warm, and loving. She was a deeply devoted Christian who bore 6 children and kept us clothed and well-fed. She loved us deeply, and she brought us up right in the church, always attending Sunday school services and getting involved in all manner of church activities. But she was a bit quirky, too. She believed in all manner of homeopathic remedies and all natural organic dietary practices. In the 1950s, long before it was popular, we were vegans. I remember a church cookout, the family next to us was frying bacon, and it smelled incredible. They offered me a piece, and from that point on, I knew my mom was nuts. Now, siblings are another long, complicated story. I'm not certain how many siblings I have. I have 4 natural brothers and 1 natural sister. I have 2 half-siblings, 2 adopted sisters, and at least 10 other step-siblings, many of which I don't know. But within the household I grew up in, my sister was firstborn and I was second. So I'm the oldest male, and 4 brothers followed. And while we were a family of 6 kids, my parents decided to adopt 2 more, 8 kids total. This, of course, had an enormous impact. even on a colonel's salary, there's just not that much left for us kids when we split it 8 ways. My dad was nevertheless consumed with delusions of grandeur, and at one point, he bought a huge mansion in Springfield, Massachusetts. But we were so poor, my mom had to sew our clothes. And I can assure you that no one else in junior high came to school wearing a homemade shirt with an ascot, okay? I learned how to fight. And birthdays and Christmas were pretty bleak living there. So next, we moved to a 2-bedroom summer cottage on a lake. 10 people sleeping in 2 bedrooms. It's reminiscent of what the immigrant families do when they first arrive in America. So you can imagine going to a brand new school, this new kid, a member of the immigrant horde that just rolled into town, dressed in homemade clothes and toting a vegetarian bag lunch. And we were expected to fit in and thrive. My sister withdrew into a shell. Her nose was always in a book, but I was an extrovert. I made friends easily. Or I should say, I became highly skilled at faking friendships. I learned from practical experience that who you are, that is, how other people perceive you, can change dramatically from one town to the next. I could put on any costume I wanted to adapt to the current conditions. I have adapted equally well to a Wall Street boardroom and a rowdy biker bar in the same weekend. I was both a humble, great dad and a successful businessman, but also an alcoholic, a drug addict, an egotistical chauvinist, and a selfish, reckless whoremonger. For Christmas on my 16th birthday, I got a duffel bag. For Christmas on 16, I got a duffel bag, which came in mighty handy because I left home at the end of my junior year, which was the same year my parents got divorced. And I told myself that their divorce was of no consequence since I didn't have to live with the step-parents. I realize now that their divorce did have a profound effect. The one and only semi-stable constant that I could rely on was torn asunder. And so I was loosed on the world at 17, an anchorless, hyper-competitive, porn-addicted misogynist, and a chameleon, highly skilled at faking friendships. But I told myself that I had a normal, happy childhood. Now, no one is entirely good or entirely bad, but I thought of my parents as the angel and the devil. Unconditional love from one and abuse and rejection from the other. But guess which one I chose to emulate? Now, I sought comfort in friends and girls and boys, but as I grew older, more women and fewer men friends. I can't remember ever being without a girlfriend. I had, at a very early age, I had sexual experiences, both willing and unwilling, with men and women that had a profound and negative effect. And to this day, I'm not sure I've ever given myself completely to a woman. I do know affection, I do know lust, but I'm not sure I know true love. I've always held something back. There were 6 women that I've had a serious enough relationship to consider marriage. But in light of my family experience, I set an arbitrary minimum age of 30 before getting married, believing that would ensure a more lasting relationship and also enough income to support my children in a fashion better than my own upbringing. So I got married at 29 and divorced at 30. My dad passed away over 2 years ago, and I still haven't grieved for him, yet I cried a river after my first divorce. And when my first wife passed away, even after not seeing her for 30 years, I bawled my eyes out again. But no tears for my dad, not even to this day. After my first divorce, I hung my guitars up on the wall, and I got serious about a career. I got remarried and started a family. I progressed from an analyst position to a senior role in the finance department, serving the numerous companies owned by a Palm Beach billionaire. I went back to school and earned a business degree. My two wonderful children were born at this time, and I continued to progress in the company, and I relished my responsibilities as a father. But my relationship with my wife cooled down. I jettisoned my treasure of porn before moving in with her, but the allure of porn never waned. And with the advent of the VCR and personal computers, it became easier to conceal it. Whenever she discovered my porn stash, we'd have bitter fights, but we stayed together. As years went by and the sex decreased, internet porn became my outlet. Porn was my gateway drug. I traveled frequently on business, and just like my dad, when he was stationed overseas, my cheating increased. I progressed to strip clubs and then to massage parlors, where I never got a massage. After my wife and I started sleeping in separate bedrooms, I went off the deep end with internet hookups and escorts and all manner of sexual excess. And after 21 years, my wife and I separated, and I moved into an apartment. And soon after, I invited an escort who is 20 years younger than me to move in, but I continued to go off the rails. I was frustrated at home and at work, and I kept repeating the mantra, I deserve more, I deserve more. I was earning more than 80% of Americans and 90% of the people on the planet. I had a faithful wife. I owned a beautiful 3,000 square foot home in a gated community, 2 intelligent, healthy, attractive, well-adjusted children, 3 cars, 2 motorcycles, and a boat, and a substantial 401k. I was respected in the community and served as treasurer of the HOA. And yet, I kept saying, I deserve more, I deserve more. Well, I stumbled into a file-sharing website while I was searching for music. The website had a button for videos, and under that, a button for adult videos. It offered child porn alongside adult porn, but the child porn titles were indistinguishable from the adult porn. Now, with children of my own who were never abused or molested, I should have been utterly disgusted. But my moral compass was completely off kilter. And even after my initial horrifying discovery, I still downloaded some files. I was caught, I was convicted, sentenced to 4 years in prison and 12 years of probation, and a lifetime of shame, and a litany of intrusive living restrictions. Now in prison, darkness and evil were palpable. The only source of light was the Bible and church activities. I was blessed to be in a dorm with a nightly prayer circle, and I studied the Bible. I witnessed miracles in that prayer circle. And when our leader got transferred, I was elected to lead. At the time, I was probably the least qualified member of the prayer circle, but Christian leadership jolted me into changing my behavior and taming my tongue. It was also in prison where I first encountered Celebrate Recovery. I got baptized, confirmed, and saved in prison, and that was the start of my recovery. God allowed me to make poor choices and provided yet another opportunity to change, prison, because I was incapable of changing on my own. I signed up for every chapel class I could, and I picked up the guitar again. In prison, my job assignment was a teacher in the education facility, but I also served as the worship team leader for both the Catholics and the Episcopalians. Upon release, I settled in Pahokee and started serving on the worship teams in 2 churches. A year later, I became the worship team leader. I was serving 5 to 7 times a week on the praise team and occasionally delivering sermons or leading Bible studies. And then COVID hit. And my devotion, my purpose, and my ministry were eliminated. And I fell into a deep depression with nothing to do, nowhere to go, and no way to serve. It was months later that I found Community of Hope and Celebrate Recovery. and I began to attending CR faithfully. I was invited to join this wonderful praise team, and I went through the CR 12-step program, and then I started working the steps in earnest with my sponsor, an AA guy. So it wasn't a happy childhood after all. It was tumultuous, it was traumatic, and it was damaging. And I ran toward a material comforts like financial success and a big house and shiny new cars, etc. I ran to porn and sexual excesses to ease the pain of my dreadful childhood abuse. I was hyper-competitive to ease the pain of rejection. I became a chameleon to ease the pain of loss and rejection. I never learned how to really love and to give it all without holding anything back, so not so much a happy childhood after all. But for me, recovery began through working the steps, recognizing and then addressing my character defects, understanding where all these coping mechanisms came from and how they resulted in more harm than good. It was through working the steps that I opened up and admitted my deepest, darkest secrets. That's step 5, the one we're working on right now. It was through working the steps that I was able to release it all and to admit my guilt and accept God's forgiveness. It was through working the steps that God began removing my defects of character and helping me to make amends. It is through working the steps that I catch myself before saying or doing something ugly, at least more now than ever before. It is through working the steps that I can remain vigilant, leaning into God's power, along with the help of my sponsor and my accountability buddies, my support network, and each and every one of you in this room, my Celebrate Recovery family. Thank you. I may not have had a happy childhood, but I have hope for a much happier future. And thanks to CR, I'm 2.5 years sober from alcohol and sober in lots of other ways as well. I look forward to a more purposeful and fulfilling future, a sober future, a future of service to God and my brothers and sisters. I encourage you to keep working the steps. It is through working the steps that I began to start focusing on others rather than on myself. I'm developing greater empathy, and I more easily recognize and relate to the pain of my brothers and sisters. I now know that I'm capable of offering something that may help to others. And I keep coming back. I keep working the steps. I keep cleaning my side of the street. I keep striving for the purpose God intended for me, and I keep feeling His mercy and experiencing His joy. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Thank you for letting me share.